The room felt lighter than usual that night, until it didn't. In the space of a single question, a routine late-night appearance shifted into something far more revealing. The smile held a second too long. The applause faded a little too quickly. And millions of viewers watching live could sense it. This was no longer just promotion. It was confrontation. If you appreciate deep, investigative storytelling about the moments that change celebrity narratives in real time, subscribe to Prime Talk, hit like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. It was supposed to be another polished stop on a global press tour. Dua Lipa, one of the most recognizable pop artists in the world, walked onto the stage of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert to the kind of applause that signals both admiration and expectation. She was at the height of her influence, chart-topping records, sold-out arenas, fashion campaigns, cultural relevance that stretched beyond music. Every public appearance mattered. Across from her sat Stephen Colbert, a host known for intelligence wrapped in humor. His interviews often begin with warmth, an easy laugh, a self-aware joke, before gradually sharpening into more thoughtful territory. The Late Show has built its identity on that balance, entertainment and inquiry sharing the same stage. Live television changes the equation. There are no safety nets, no pauses for rewrites, no quiet edits in post-production. What happens in those moments belongs to the audience instantly and permanently. The interview opened as many do. A brief exchange about touring. A reference to her recent projects. Laughter that felt rehearsed in the best possible way, not scripted, but familiar. The kind of back and forth that reassures viewers everything is under control. But control on live television is fragile. Dua Lipa's career has not been defined only by music. She has spoken publicly about identity, global politics, and personal boundaries. In interviews, she often balances openness with restraint, careful about what belongs to her art and what belongs to her private life. That distinction is part of her brand, confident, composed, deliberate. Colbert's style, meanwhile, thrives on gently pressing beyond rehearsed answers. He is known for asking the follow-up that others might avoid. On a pre-taped show, that tension can be trimmed down. On a live broadcast, it unfolds without interruption. As the conversation progressed, the energy in the studio shifted in subtle ways. The laughter softened. The pauses stretched a fraction longer. Colbert leaned slightly forward in his chair, signaling a pivot from playful to probing. The audience, still responsive, sensed the transition. This is where live interviews become unpredictable. Because when a host decides to move from surface topics into more sensitive territory, timing becomes everything. Tone becomes everything. And the guest must decide, in real time, how much to give. Dua Lipa had faced scrutiny before, over lyrics, over statements, over interpretations of her public comments. She had navigated criticism with measured responses, rarely appearing visibly unsettled. That composure was part of why this moment mattered. Viewers were not tuning in expecting volatility. They were expecting control. Colbert framed his next question carefully. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't aggressive. It was structured, deliberate, the kind of inquiry that sounds conversational but carries weight beneath it. He referenced prior headlines. He referenced public reactions. And then he asked. For a second, nothing seemed unusual. Dua Lipa maintained eye contact. She listened fully. But something shifted, not dramatically, not theatrically, just enough to register with anyone paying attention. Her posture straightened. Her smile faded into neutrality. Silence on live television is louder than any applause. The studio audience waited. Colbert waited. The camera held steady. Moments like this rarely announce themselves. They emerge gradually, almost invisibly, before solidifying into something unmistakable. And once they do, they can redefine an entire appearance. This was no longer about album promotion. It was no longer about tour dates or creative process. It was about boundaries, about how far a host can go, and how a guest responds when that line feels close. For viewers at home, multitasking, half-watching, the tonal change cut through distraction. The rhythm of the conversation had altered. Something real was happening. Colbert's reputation as an incisive interviewer meant the question would not simply drift away. If Dua Lipa chose to answer directly, the conversation would deepen. If she chose to redirect, the tension would sharpen. Either way, the exchange was about to define the night. And that is what makes live television powerful. There are no handlers stepping in. No producers calling for a break. No editing rooms smoothing over discomfort. The stakes are visible. The reactions are immediate. In the days that followed, clips would circulate. Commentary would dissect facial expressions and phrasing. But in that moment, none of that analysis existed yet. There was only the stage, the host, the artist, and the question hanging in the air. Dua Lipa inhaled slightly before responding. A small gesture, easily missed, but meaningful in context. It suggested calculation, the careful choice of words that often determines whether a moment diffuses or escalates. For Colbert, the responsibility was equally real. Push too far, and risk appearing confrontational. Retreat too quickly, and risk seeming performative. The balance between journalistic curiosity and entertainment had narrowed to a single exchange. What unfolded next would not be loud. It would not involve shouting or spectacle. It would be measured, controlled, and unmistakably tense, the kind of confrontation that doesn't rely on volume but on precision. And as the conversation edged closer to that turning point, one thing became clear. This was no longer just another stop on a press tour. It was a live test of composure, boundaries, and the power dynamic between celebrity and host. What exactly was asked, and how Dua Lipa chose to answer, would determine whether the moment faded quietly or echoed far beyond that studio. And that answer was only seconds away. Before that night ever aired, the groundwork had already been laid. Dua Lipa was not entering the late show as a newcomer navigating her first wave of fame. She was stepping onto that stage as a global figure, a Grammy-winning artist whose influence extended beyond radio charts and streaming numbers. With multiple eras of music behind her, high-profile collaborations, and a carefully built public identity, she understood the mechanics of visibility. But visibility comes with layers. Over the years, Dua Lipa has spoken openly about her heritage and her connection to Kosovo. She has used her platform to share personal pride and cultural perspective. In doing so, she stepped into conversations that often stretch far beyond entertainment. In the digital age, statements travel instantly. Context compresses. Nuance competes with headlines. Public reactions to celebrity commentary are rarely uniform. Some audiences celebrate outspokenness. Others scrutinize it. For global artists, especially those with international backgrounds, identity can become both a source of strength and a point of contention. None of this was new to her by the time she sat across from Stephen Colbert. Stephen Colbert, meanwhile, built his career on the intersection of humor and political awareness. Long before hosting The Late Show, he became known for sharp satire and intelligent commentary. His interviewing style evolved into something layered, approachable, but pointed. Playful, but capable of pivoting into seriousness without warning. That combination is precisely why high-profile guests agree to appear. Colbert's audience expects more than promotional banter. They expect conversation with substance. Leading up to the interview, Dua Lipa was in the middle of an active creative period. She had been performing internationally, expanding her sound, and speaking about artistic growth. Interviews across various outlets largely centered on music, songwriting, collaboration, performance, and the pressure of sustaining success. But there is always a subtext. When artists with strong cultural identities speak publicly, the media rarely confines them strictly to entertainment. Past statements are revisited. Old interviews are clipped and reshared. Commentary resurfaces at moments when visibility peaks. It is not uncommon for late-night hosts to gently test those waters. Behind the scenes of any major talk show appearance, producers and publicists coordinate talking points. There are broad outlines of discussion, new projects, tour schedules, recent milestones. But within those outlines, there is room for spontaneity, especially on a live broadcast. Live television alters the dynamic entirely. On a pre-recorded show, tone can be managed. Awkward pauses can be trimmed. Responses can be tightened for pacing. But live television demands adaptability. If a question lands unexpectedly, the reaction is preserved in full. That reality alone raises stakes. In the days before the broadcast, there was quiet online speculation about whether the conversation might move beyond music. It wasn't driven by scandal. It was driven by pattern. Colbert is known for asking thoughtful questions about public responsibility. Dua Lipa is known for having thoughtful opinions. When those two reputations intersect, tension is not inevitable, but it is possible. The cultural environment at the time also mattered. Public discourse around celebrity activism had intensified in recent years. Audiences questioned authenticity. Critics questioned impact. Social media amplified both support and skepticism. For an artist like Dua Lipa, who had previously clarified her intentions in public statements, revisiting those discussions could feel repetitive. Yet ignoring them entirely might seem evasive. The balance is delicate. As taping approached, the expectation was likely a blend of light-hearted promotion and measured conversation. That's the formula late night thrives on. Establish comfort first. Build rapport. Then explore deeper themes gradually. And initially, that is exactly how it unfolded. The opening minutes of the interview reflected mutual respect. Colbert acknowledged her achievements. He framed her success within the broader landscape of pop culture. Dua Lipa responded with warmth, discussing creative evolution and the realities of touring. The rhythm felt controlled. But context has momentum. Colbert's audience is accustomed to political awareness woven into dialogue. His questions often emerge from curiosity about how public figures see their own influence. It is not interrogation in the traditional sense. It is inquiry shaped by worldview. For Dua Lipa, the challenge was not unfamiliar territory. She had navigated serious interviews before. She had answered pointed questions without raising her voice or losing composure. Her brand depends partly on that steadiness. Still, live television magnifies even subtle shifts. The set design, the studio lights, the live band, the audience energy, all of it creates a stage where tone can transform quickly. A single follow-up can extend a conversation beyond its planned boundaries. As the segment moved forward, Colbert gradually shifted from personal anecdotes to broader themes. He referenced the responsibilities that come with a global platform. He touched on how artists today operate in a climate where every statement can become headline material. It was a natural transition, almost seamless. But viewers who were paying attention could sense the direction. The questions were narrowing. The frame was tightening. Dua Lipa listened attentively. Her responses remained measured, but shorter. Not evasive, simply precise. She appeared aware that the conversation was approaching more sensitive territory. That awareness is crucial. In live interviews, anticipation can be as powerful as the moment itself. The audience, too, adjusts subconsciously. Laughter becomes lighter. Applause becomes tentative. Silence grows heavier. By the time Colbert positioned the question that would later define the exchange, the groundwork had already been laid. The conversation had traveled from music to meaning, from performance to perspective. And that progression matters, because the confrontation, if it could even be called that, did not erupt from nowhere. It evolved through careful pacing, through incremental shifts in subject and tone. Neither participant appeared unprepared. Neither seemed blindsided. But preparedness does not eliminate discomfort. When a public figure revisits a subject that has generated controversy, even in measured terms, the stakes feel immediate. The answer must be clear, but controlled. Honest, but calibrated. As Colbert leaned slightly forward, signaling another follow-up, the energy in the studio subtly recalibrated. This was no longer a promotional interview drifting toward its conclusion. It was approaching a test. And once that line was crossed, once the question was spoken aloud, there would be no rewinding it. The cameras were live. The audience was silent. And the moment everyone would later analyze was about to begin. The shift happened in real time. Stephen Colbert paused just long enough to signal that what he was about to ask carried more weight than the questions before it. His tone did not rise. His posture did not change dramatically. But the cadence slowed. The framing narrowed. He referenced the broader conversation around celebrity influence, how artists with global platforms navigate political identity and public responsibility. Then he brought it closer. More specific. More personal. The question was structured carefully. It acknowledged Dua Lipa's heritage. It acknowledged prior public reactions. And it asked, directly, how she reconciled her personal convictions with the backlash that sometimes followed. There was no accusation in his voice. No visible hostility. Just precision. Dua Lipa did not interrupt. She listened fully, her expression neutral but focused. The studio lights reflected softly across the desk between them. The audience, sensing the tonal shift, withheld laughter. A brief pause followed. On live television, silence expands. It lingers longer than it would in any other setting. It becomes part of the exchange. Dua inhaled subtly and began her response. She spoke evenly, choosing her words carefully. She clarified that her statements had always come from lived experience, from personal history rather than provocation. She emphasized that nuance often gets lost in digital spaces. She acknowledged that different audiences interpret public figures differently. Her voice remained calm. Colbert nodded, maintaining eye contact. He allowed her to finish before responding. Then came the follow-up. It wasn't louder. It wasn't confrontational. It was tighter. He asked whether she believed public figures have an obligation to anticipate how their words might be interpreted globally, even beyond their original intent. The phrasing shifted the focus from personal narrative to accountability. Another pause. Dua's posture straightened slightly. Her hands, resting together moments earlier, separated as she gestured gently to underscore her point. She stated that while artists should be mindful of their reach, they should not be expected to silence their identity or personal truth. The audience remained quiet. No applause. No laughter. The absence of reaction was its own signal. Colbert leaned back a fraction, then leaned forward again, a subtle physical recalibration. He clarified that his question was not about silencing identity, but about navigating complexity in a polarized environment. The word complexity lingered. Dua responded that complexity cannot be reduced to social media headlines. She explained that conversations around heritage and history require depth. She spoke deliberately, maintaining composure. The tension did not erupt. It tightened. Because this was live, there were no cutaways to reaction shots beyond what the broadcast captured naturally. The camera alternated between them steadily. No dramatic zooms. No stylized edits. Just two public figures negotiating meaning in real time. Colbert asked one final clarifying question, shorter this time, focused on whether she felt misunderstood by critics. The question landed with noticeable weight. For a moment, Dua did not answer immediately. She held his gaze. The silence stretched again. Viewers at home likely felt it, that fraction of suspended time where the next sentence determines the direction of the segment. When she spoke, her tone remained controlled. She acknowledged that being misunderstood is part of public life. She stated that growth and dialogue are ongoing processes. She did not apologize. She did not escalate. She simply articulated her stance with measured certainty. The audience exhaled collectively, though no one audibly reacted. Colbert nodded slowly. He thanked her for addressing the topic directly. His voice softened slightly as he began transitioning the conversation toward closure. But the atmosphere had already shifted. The earlier lightness, the promotional rhythm, was gone. What remained was seriousness. No one had raised their voice. No one had interrupted the other. Yet the exchange felt undeniably confrontational in its structure. It was a confrontation of ideas, not personalities. The closing remarks came with polite acknowledgement. Colbert referenced her upcoming projects again. He thanked her for being open. Dua offered a brief smile, thinner than before, but composed. Applause followed. Respectful. Sustained. But different in tone from the opening ovation. Because the audience had just witnessed something unscripted. Live television preserves nuance in a way edited segments cannot. Every pause remained intact. Every hesitation remained visible. There was no smoothing over the tension. As the camera widened and the band prepared to transition, the segment concluded without spectacle. No dramatic walk-off. No visible frustration. Just two professionals maintaining composure under scrutiny. But the energy in the room had changed. For viewers watching in real time, the moment felt distinct from routine late-night interviews. It felt closer to a negotiation of narrative, who defines intent, who frames responsibility, and how public figures respond when those frames are challenged. Within minutes of the broadcast, clips began circulating online. Short excerpts of the question, fragments of her response, interpretations layered over body language analysis. Some described it as thoughtful. Others described it as tense. What could not be denied was that it unfolded live. No editing room shaped the tone afterward. No captions softened the phrasing. It existed exactly as it happened. And that is what gave it weight. In the span of a few measured exchanges, the interview transformed from promotional appearance to cultural conversation. The confrontation was not explosive, but it was undeniable. The equilibrium between host and guest had shifted, subtly, permanently, in front of a national audience. And once that shift occurs on live television, it doesn't simply disappear when the credits roll. If you want to understand how that moment reshaped public perception and what happened immediately after the cameras cut away, stay with Prime Talk. The aftermath reveals just as much as the exchange itself. When the cameras pulled back and the band's music rose to signal the end of the segment, the atmosphere inside the studio did not immediately reset. Applause filled the room, but it carried a different texture than the opening ovation. It was appreciative, yet restrained. Audience members clapped because the exchange had concluded, because that is what happens at the end of a late-night interview. But the energy was more contemplative than celebratory. Stephen Colbert turned slightly toward his desk, organizing his note cards in a gesture that felt procedural, almost grounding. Dua Lipa maintained her composure, offering a polite smile as the closing graphics rolled. On the surface, everything followed format. Underneath, something had shifted. Live television does not provide the luxury of decompression in the moment. There is no pause for emotional recalibration. The show continues. The host moves forward. The next segment begins. But for viewers, the exchange lingered. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, short clips began circulating online. The initial posts did not frame the moment as dramatic. They framed it as notable. Observers highlighted the pauses, the follow-up questions, the measured but firm tone of Dua's responses. Because the confrontation had not been loud, interpretation became the battleground. Some viewers praised Colbert for addressing a complex subject directly. They viewed the exchange as an example of thoughtful journalism within an entertainment format. Others expressed concern that the line between inquiry and discomfort had narrowed too tightly for a promotional interview. What made the moment resonate was its restraint. There had been no raised voices, no visible frustration, just a tightening of tone that everyone could feel. Inside the studio, the shift was subtle but unmistakable. Audience members who had expected a light-hearted segment left with something heavier. Not scandal, not outrage, reflection. Colbert, seasoned in navigating serious conversations, did not publicly revisit the exchange later in the episode. He did not joke about it. He did not overcorrect. The show moved forward with its usual pacing, a sign that, from a production standpoint, nothing had gone wrong. Yet something had changed in perception. For Dua Lipa, the immediate aftermath required composure beyond the stage. Publicists and team members likely monitored online reaction in real time. That is standard for any major appearance. But this time, the focus was not on a performance clip or a promotional soundbite. It was on tone. Clips isolating specific seconds of silence spread across social platforms. Comment sections filled quickly. Words like tense, intense, and unexpected appeared repeatedly. The exchange was dissected not for what was said alone, but for how it was delivered. Body language became a subject of analysis. Viewers pointed to the moment her posture shifted, to the second Colbert leaned forward, to the pause before her final answer. In live television, nuance becomes content. Traditional media outlets soon followed. Headlines framed the interview as a serious discussion that momentarily disrupted late-night levity. Most avoided exaggeration. The facts were clear, a direct question had been asked, and a direct answer had been given. But tone cannot be easily summarized in a headline. That is why the moment endured beyond the broadcast itself. For Colbert, the situation reaffirmed his reputation as a host willing to move beyond surface-level engagement. Supporters argued that meaningful conversations belong everywhere, even in entertainment spaces. Critics suggested that timing and context matter, that promotional interviews carry implicit boundaries. For Dua Lipa, the impact was equally layered. Her response reinforced her public image as composed and deliberate. She did not evade. She did not escalate. She articulated her position with steadiness. Yet the fact that the exchange became a focal point at all meant the narrative of her appearance had shifted. Instead of headlines about her latest creative project, coverage centered on the conversation. That shift illustrates the fragile ecosystem of celebrity interviews. One segment can redirect attention entirely. In the days following the broadcast, neither party issued clarifications or statements. There was no public feud, no follow-up confrontation. The absence of escalation underscored the professionalism on both sides. And that absence may have amplified the moment's significance. Because when controversy is loud, it often fades quickly. When tension is quiet and controlled, it invites sustained examination. Culturally, the interview tapped into a broader question. What do audiences expect from artists in politically charged times? And what do they expect from hosts who command national platforms? The exchange between Dua Lipa and Stephen Colbert did not answer those questions definitively. It illustrated them. For viewers, the live nature of the moment was central. There had been no opportunity to soften phrasing in post-production. No chance to recalibrate after seeing audience reaction. It unfolded authentically. And authenticity, even when uncomfortable, carries weight. Late-night television occupies a unique space in American media. It blends comedy, culture, and commentary. When that balance tips towards seriousness, the effect can be jarring. But it can also be revealing. In this case, What changed instantly was not either individual's career trajectory. It was perception. The audience saw a pop star defending her perspective without theatrics. They saw a host pursuing clarity without aggression. The confrontation existed in the space between those two dynamics. In retrospect, the moment stands as an example of how live interviews can transcend their format. A few carefully worded questions, a few measured answers, and the tone of an entire broadcast shifts. No one stormed off. No accusations were made. But the energy in that studio, and across screens nationwide, felt undeniably different by the time the segment ended. And that difference is why the exchange still resonates. If you value thoughtful analysis of moments like this, where live television reveals more than rehearsed narratives, subscribe to Prime Talk, like this video, and share your perspective in the comments below.